We spend much of our lives mastering the art of appearing composed, polished, rational, emotionally steady. We learn early on how to maintain this illusion. Most of the time, we succeed. We handle inconveniences with a forced smile, press through heartbreak with practiced stoicism, and bury panic beneath a layer of dry humour. To the outside world, we look normal. Inside, the storm often brews unnoticed. Occasionally, there are cracks. A trembling hand during a late-night drive, a silent meltdown behind a locked bathroom door, a trembling sigh as the train rocks us home. But we tighten the lid again. We promise ourselves it was a fluke. No one saw. No one needs to know. But life has a way of testing our armour, not with small scratches, but with devastating collisions. One day, we encounter something that shatters the boundaries we built. A sudden crisis, be it the collapse of a relationship, a crushing loss at work, a family rupture, a terrifying health scare, slams into our carefully maintained image of strength. Suddenly, we can't hold ourselves together. The tools we've relied on, logic, composure, self-discipline, are no longer enough. Our thoughts race, our emotions swirl. We feel stranded in unfamiliar waters, terrified and desperately alone. At first, we try to manage it like always. We tell ourselves to pull through, to not make a fuss. But the weight grows. The silence thickens. Sleep becomes elusive. Even mundane tasks begin to feel like insurmountable challenges. The thought emerges, dark, uninvited, but persistent. Wouldn't it be easier if I just disappeared? Not for attention, not for drama, just for the pain to stop. It's a moment many have lived through in quiet agony, a point where the world outside continues its usual pace, while your inner world collapses in slow motion. And the most dangerous part is not the pain itself, but the belief that no one could possibly understand it, that reaching out is a burden, that collapsing is shameful. But if we are to survive, and survival is absolutely what's at stake, we must do the hardest thing of all, speak. Not to everyone, just to someone. A message, a call, a note scribbled in trembling handwriting. Something like, "I'm sorry to bring this up. I know you're busy, but I don't think I can handle this alone anymore." Everything we've been taught screams against this. We've learned that vulnerability is weakness, that confession means failure, that real strength means solitude. But that is a lie, and clinging to it could cost us our life. So, even if our voice shakes, even if the words feel awkward and clumsy, we must try. We might start by choosing someone we trust, a friend, a relative, even someone we haven't spoken to in a while. They may not be perfect. They may be anxious or distracted or unsure of what to say. But perfection is not what we need. We need presence. We need a mind outside our own to help carry the weight. We often underestimate others. We think our sadness is too much, that our chaos would scare them away. But we forget. They too have their scars. They have fought battles, made mistakes, faced grief. And they might surprise us with how willing, even grateful, they are to help. Because here's the truth. Most people are quietly waiting to be needed. Not out of obligation, but because being able to help someone else reminds them they still matter. That they aren't alone, either. And in reaching out, we may do more than save ourselves. We may give someone else the gift of connection. We may remind them that humanity isn't built on self-sufficiency, but on interdependence, on shared vulnerability, on knowing that when life becomes unbearable, someone else will sit in the dark with us until the light returns. Once the initial silence is broken and you've reached out, even if just barely, it might seem like things should quickly improve. But healing is rarely linear. In fact, the moment we expose the pain we've hidden for years, a second wave of turbulence often arrives. Because here's what no one tells you. Relief can feel like fear. When you've spent your entire life bracing for impact, waiting for the next betrayal, disappointment, or collapse, peace feels unnatural. It's like suddenly walking on soft ground after years of sharp stones. You want to relax, but your body doesn't trust it. It's still waiting to flinch. This is when old habits crawl back in. You start replaying old arguments in your head, doubting the sincerity of those who care, checking your phone obsessively, or spiraling into obsessive self-criticism. Not because you're broken, but because chaos is familiar, and familiarity feels safe, even if it hurts. And so, the work of healing, begins not with transformation, but with endurance, with sitting in discomfort without needing to solve it, with learning how to just breathe through the moments that used to make you run. You might expect grand breakthroughs. You may think you're failing when the tears return or when rage shows up unexpectedly. But in reality, these are signs of movement. Emotions that were once trapped in the basement of your psyche are finally surfacing. And while that can be terrifying, it's also progress. Here's the paradox. The breakdown is often the beginning of repair. It's during these moments that we're tempted to look for quick exits, new relationships, reckless decisions, numbing habits, anything to distract from the ache. But the real work asks us to stay, to stop abandoning ourselves when it gets hard, to sit with the trembling child inside us, not as an enemy to silence, but as someone finally ready to be heard. And if we can do that, if we can meet our own wounds without flinching, we unlock something more powerful than temporary relief. We unlock resilience, the kind that doesn't come from avoiding suffering, but from learning how to walk through it with open eyes. This is why therapy, journaling, or even just slow, consistent conversations can be life-saving. Not because they erase the pain, but because they create a space where your pain no longer isolates you, where your inner chaos has language, where shame starts to loosen its grip. And here's something vital. You don't need to be eloquent to be understood. You don't need to make sense of it all before you're allowed to speak. The healing doesn't wait for your perfection. It waits for your honesty. Often it begins with something small. A sentence like, "I don't know what's wrong, but I don't feel okay." Or, "I feel like I'm drowning and I don't know why." These are not weak words. They are the seeds of a new chapter. But even then, don't expect applause. Don't expect the pain to vanish. Healing is slow, sometimes maddeningly so. But every time you choose not to run, every time you show up for yourself, you're building a foundation for the life you always deserved, but were too hurt to believe was possible. You're not starting over, you're starting true. The psychology of attraction. Why we're drawn to what hurts us. You've left once, maybe twice, but somehow you always come back. They say all the right things. Their voice softens, their eyes shimmer with regret, and suddenly the pain blurs into memory. You tell yourself, they're trying, and maybe they are. But something deeper is pulling you back. And it's not love, it's your unconscious. Carl Jung believed that what we fail to make conscious will return as fate. In other words, we don't just fall in love, we fall into our unresolved wounds. We are drawn, not randomly, but magnetically, to the people who mirror our hidden pain. And until we face that pain, we confuse comfort with connection. The familiarity trap. Maybe you grew up walking on eggshells, where love meant guessing moods and earning affection. Now, in adulthood, chaos feels like chemistry. You mistake anxiety for passion, tension for intensity. But it's not passion, it's repetition. Jung would say, this is the psyche's attempt at integration. The unconscious seeks to resolve what the conscious mind avoids. So, you're drawn to people who embody the parent who criticized you, the sibling who ignored you, or the partner who left. Not because you want pain, but because a part of you believes, if I can win them over, I'll finally be enough. But healing doesn't happen by reliving the wound. It happens by choosing different. Projection. Seeing who they could be, not who they are. You don't love them for who they are now. You love who they could become. This is one of the most dangerous illusions in a toxic relationship. You see their potential, not their pattern. You justify bad behavior with, they didn't mean it, or they're just struggling. You become their therapist, their savior, their excuse. Jung warned of this psychological trap. Projection is when we disown a part of ourselves and assign it to someone else. You see their potential because it's a reflection of your own. But as long as you focus on their healing, you avoid your own. You cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And losing yourself in the attempt isn't noble. It's self-abandonment. Shadow bonds, trauma as the glue. It's not always abuse that holds toxic relationships together. Sometimes it's shared trauma. Maybe you both come from pain. Maybe you bond over darkness. There's comfort in that. You feel seen, understood. But pain isn't the same as compatibility. Shared wounds don't guarantee shared growth. Jung's concept of the shadow bond is about this exact connection. When two unhealed people find safety in each other's dysfunction, it feels like love, but it's more like an emotional pact. I won't challenge your darkness if you don't challenge mine. And while it may feel safe, it keeps you both stuck. The addiction to hope. They say something sweet. They promise to change. And for a moment, you believe. Hope can be beautiful, but in toxic dynamics, it becomes a drug. You chase the version of them that shows up only occasionally, enduring the worst just to get a taste of the best. This intermittent reinforcement is exactly what makes it so hard to leave. It creates a cycle of craving. You're not staying for love. You're staying for the chance that the love might return. But Jung might ask, what part of you is addicted to pain dressed as promise? Until you confront that answer, you'll keep mistaking breadcrumbs for a feast. The inner conflict, love versus loyalty to your wounds. Here's the brutal truth. Sometimes the part of you that stays is loyal to your trauma. You learned that love means endurance, that to be chosen, you must be patient, that if you suffer long enough, they'll see your worth. But that's not love. That's survival. Jung believed that healing begins when we stop romanticizing pain, when we stop calling struggle a virtue and start calling it what it is. A sign we've abandoned ourselves. You don't have to prove your worth through suffering. You already are enough. What keeps you? There isn't love. It's the fear of losing the dream. Sometimes we don't fear being alone. We fear letting go of the fantasy. You imagined growing old together. You pictured your future. You believed they were the one. Letting go doesn't just feel like heartbreak. It feels like death. The death of a dream. But Jung would say that dreams that demand you shrink are not worth keeping. You deserve a reality where your light doesn't have to dim to keep someone close. To be continued. In the final section, we'll walk through the path out. Not just leaving the relationship, but leaving behind the identity you built around it. Jung reminds us, the shadow isn't evil, it's wounded. But once acknowledged, it becomes your greatest teacher. Healing begins when you stop rescuing others and finally return to yourself. The exit isn't the end, it's the beginning. Leaving a toxic relationship isn't the final step, it's the first. At first, there's relief. Then there's silence. A stillness so loud it drowns out your thoughts. You question everything. Was it really that bad? Did I overreact? What if they really do change this time? This is where many people return, not because they want more pain, but because pain is predictable. And when your nervous system has lived in chaos, peace can feel like danger. Carl Jung warned us, we are not only afraid of our darkness, we're also afraid of our light. To walk away from pain is to walk into unfamiliar freedom. And that freedom requires you to become someone new, someone no longer defined by their wounds. Who are you without the pain? This question haunts many survivors of toxic relationships. You spent so long trying to be enough for someone else, you lost sight of what you actually need. The relationship became your identity. Their approval was your compass. Now, without them, you feel unmoored. But this is not emptiness. It's space. Space to rebuild, to rediscover. Jung believed individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires confronting the unconscious and reclaiming the disowned parts of ourselves. This is your chance to do just that, to find the version of you that doesn't need saving or fixing, but simply needs witnessing. You are not broken, you are buried, and now you dig. The grief of what could have been. What makes toxic love so hard to release isn't just the pain, it's the potential. You're not mourning reality, you're mourning the idea of who they could have been, of what the two of you could have built. That imagined future becomes a ghost, haunting every step forward. But Jung would say, fantasy is a projection of the unconscious. It reflects your hopes, your wounds, your desires, not necessarily what is true. And while grief is natural, don't confuse hope with history. You're not leaving a person. You're leaving a story, one that kept you small, afraid, and unseen. Now, you get to write a new one, turning the focus inward. After the breakup, many people immediately ask, why did I attract that? It's a fair question, but one often laced with shame, as if toxicity was your fault, as if you should have known better. But Jung reminds us, the unconscious doesn't operate with judgment, it operates with patterns. You didn't choose pain on purpose. You chose what felt familiar, what felt right in your body, even if it was wrong for your soul. Now, the work is not self-blame, but self-inquiry. What part of you equated love with struggle? Where did you learn that loyalty means self-erasure? And most importantly, are you ready to unlearn it? Healing isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. And awareness creates choice. The rebirth, becoming who you were meant to be. This is the hardest part, not walking away, but staying away long enough to meet the person you were before the damage. That person is still there, hidden beneath layers of survival strategies, people-pleasing, and emotional armor. They've been waiting. Not for the relationship to change, but for you to change. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege requires letting go of who you had to be just to survive. You are not the version of you shaped by someone else's chaos. You are not the mask you wore to keep the peace. You are not the silence you held to avoid conflict. You are what remains when you stop running. Building a life that feels safe. Now, the goal is not just to survive, but to feel safe, loved, and whole. That might mean learning to set boundaries that once felt mean, saying no without explanation, choosing peace over passion, rewiring your nervous system so calm doesn't feel like boredom. It may be messy, you'll likely stumble, but the difference now is this. You are no longer abandoning yourself. Every choice that honors your truth becomes an act of self-respect. Every time you resist the urge to go back, you rewrite the script. You are no longer the wounded, you are the healer, and not of others, of yourself. A final reflection, Jung's greatest gift. Jung never promised a life free of pain. He promised meaning. He believed that facing our darkness is how we reclaim our power. That integration, not perfection, is the path to wholeness. You left the relationship, but more importantly, you left the illusion that pain is love. Now you don't just walk away, you walk towards something, yourself.